are you listening to? Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn. We have another exciting episode. A really meaty episode that we have tonight. We're going to be talking about what happens when your boss demands to know your health status and requires that in order for you to keep working, to put bread on the table, that you have to undergo an experimental or an approved medical procedure, put a unapproved medical product in your body. And then we're going to go into... we're going to talk with the director of a new documentary that a large portion of that was produced here in Utah. Some of you have maybe seen that, and it's called Identity Marxism, The Rise of Critical Race Theory. So, a lot of stuff.
Critical race theory doesn't exist in Utah schools.
It doesn't.
No.
And that's what.
In fact, I don't think it's even a thing.
No, it's not. And that's what the director is going to confirm for us.
I'm sure.
It's just an empty reel of nothing to talk about. But okay, so this is amazing, and I'm gonna have to read this introduction because we have the Michael Jordan of constitutional attorneys tonight, and I really, I've heard him referred to, the Michael Jordan of constitutional attorneys, many times. We have with us John W. Howard, and he has received the highest possible rating for both legal ability and ethical standards last year, at just top of the field, and among his peers who also kind of rate each other within the industry. He has received the top accolades from his own peers in the legal community. So again, any legal team he's on, he's the MVP of a dream team. So John has taken on possibly some of the most significant cases, and right now I would argue is maybe the most significant case is this right to privacy, medical privacy, and do we really enjoy the freedom to move around society, to participate in commerce, to not have our livelihoods threatened if we don't do a medical procedure our boss wants us to do. So John has been in this arena, has got a lot of clients that they need his help. So welcome, John.
Glad to have you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Let me just say, as we start out, though, he's also done some work in the state on public lands. Another one of those simple, issues that we've never struggled with as a state.
Right.
That the federal government is totally cool with. Us kind of dealing with the public lands within our state the way we'd like to. So
almost 2/3 of our public lands controlled by the federal government.
And
John helping us try to unentangle us from the federal government. Also, a big job. So, John, how did we go from the point of employers can't ask you anything about your health status, medical history? They can't ask you if you plan to get pregnant, have you had cancer? They can't ask you anything, to now not only are they insisting that they can ask you, but they're insisting that they can force you under duress of employment to participate in really a highly politicized, and as I mentioned at the top of the segment, something that the FDA has regarded as an unapproved medical product. How did we get there? How did we come so far in 2 years?
Yeah, short time.
Yeah, it's a remarkable thing. One of the things that used to be one of the bulwarks for American freedom was private enterprise. The companies tended to be more conservative and tended to care more about the private rights of their employees. Now, of course, under pressure from the administration, under pressure from what I consider to be an international panic over something that is serious but not critical. They've buckled under the pressure of conventional wisdom, which is really one of the hardest things to fight. So, do they have the right to tell their employees what their employees will do? To a larger degree than the government does to tell individuals, but employees are also entitled to other protections. So one of the things that you're finding with some of the larger employers is that they're denying people religious exemptions, just as one example. And they can't do that. They certainly can deny a religious exemption, but the problem that they then have is that they are discriminating against somebody on the basis of religion if they do deny a religious exemption that's legitimate and discriminate against them on that basis. For example, disciplining them or firing them. I don't know what happened to corporate America, to be honest. They've forgotten who their friends are.
Yeah, absolutely. So you had some significant clients approach you. You represented at least two large groups that I'm aware of. Why did they come to you? Why them? What were they experiencing?
Well, I can tell you that one of the biggest groups, and we're having some success with their case in Florida. That one of the biggest groups is the federal employees, and that was one of the bigger surprises. And I asked a federal firefighter why it was that she was seeking to avoid the mandate. She said, "Well, I can tell you, it's very simple. We go out every day. You don't see it in the papers, but we go out every day on people who've had bad reactions to the vaccine, extremely bad." And she said, now this was several months ago, she said, "Last week I had to treat a Marine drill instructor." Now those people, there's nobody in better shape than Marine drill instructors, in full cardiac arrest getting the vaccine. And she had to paddle him with the electric paddles 4 or 5 times to get him back to life. This is something that isn't being reported, and it is something, people talk about the news media being biased. Sometimes their bias is demonstrated by what they don't tell you, rather than just their expressing their opinion. But this situation is a fairly serious one. It's not being reported in the news media, but we have over 700,000 very, very bad adverse reactions to the vaccine. We've had over 20,000 deaths from the vaccine. Now, in the scheme of things, 20,000 deaths versus 800,000 deaths from the virus is not anything, is not particularly significant, except that it's a false comparison. In any event, that's the reason they were going on that. And I will say that if people want the statistics, they can get on the CDC website and they can find VAERS, that's the vaccine adverse reaction section, and they can see how bad it really is. There's some estimates that something like 1% of those adverse reactions are actually reported. Now, when a firefighter client of mine from Alameda told me that, I said, "Well, that sounds to me an awful lot like an urban legend." And he said, "No, I'll tell you why I believe it." He said, "We have to report those things." He said, "Do you know how long it takes us to fill out the paperwork just to make one report? 45 minutes. Do you think we have time to do that? We just don't do it." So that's one group we're representing. We're representing 25,000 railway workers. In fact, that's a case in Salt Lake City. Our local counsel is somebody you're well familiar with, Ken Ivory. And, you mentioned by the way, just I want to say parenthetically, you mentioned the work we've done in public lands. You have some heroes in your legislature like Ken Ivory and Kevin Stratton, especially. Some really great people carrying that ball as we speak.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I mentioned, but you're from California, and we're talking to you from California, but you have done this great work even here in our state.
Yeah.
We refer to it as Calizuela. Thank you.
I'm sure it's feeling more and more like that every single day.
It is.
So
if I actually had any brains, I'd be living there.
Well, we got to hold the line here. So, yeah. I mean, that's what we're working on. And part of what Carolyn and I are trying to do is just keep some conservatism alive.
Well, and even kind of understanding this proper balance, right? The whole discussion around federalism is one that I think people innately feel it, or they remember what they learned kind of in the back of their heads, what they learned long ago in school, but it's not something that we discuss very often. And even lawmakers in this state, it seems like they struggle to have those conversations. And the reason I say they struggle to have those conversations is I know they would much rather talk about a new program or some way that they can help an individual constituent who they represent in a concrete way. and
Rather than these
federalism,
theoretical.
it feels too theoretical. There's not a quick return on investment, and it's
It's less tangible.
it's much less tangible, and it requires some education.
And yet it's so vital. Yet it's so vital.
It's at the heart of everything, and it's at the heart of issues like this, right? The federal government started driving this. I mean, we're dealing with it on a host of levels. And you said it, John, the push for these vaccines initially and the mandates with vaccines came from the federal government, but pressure was put on private business, and they knew that if they put enough pressure on private business, and I guarantee that there were conversations that none of us are privy to that have not been reported on that took place behind the scenes, where it was pressure that we don't even know that took place, that was put on these businesses to, just think about all
contracts.
Think about all the money that has been dumped into the system, right? And how, I don't know. All I'm speculating on is that there are a lot of favors out there, and probably a lot of chits that can be called in. So conversations could take place, for all we know, that could put people in a difficult position for whatever reason, where they start then mandating it with employees. But I have a question for you, John, as a constitutional attorney. And this isn't dealing with the government, but we recently in this state, it was 2 days ago, heard a bill, HB 60, which, in essence bans vaccine passports. And it deals with discrimination on the basis of immunity status. But it deals with, there is a section, that deals with the emergency use authorization, but for the most part, it's dealing with private businesses and vaccine passports within those businesses, whether it be with customers or employees. But there is an argument that we keep hearing from conservatives that, we don't want to regulate businesses. It's not our place to step in. Give us your take on that, what the proper role is of government when it comes to these kinds of forced or coerced health decisions.
I'm glad you asked me that, because that's something that has been misconstrued by a lot of people. And I have to say that the essence of conservatism, if there's one single organizing principle, it's individual liberty. That's the primary thing. So why is it that we believe so strongly in not regulating business? And why are we so promotive of freedom of enterprise? Because it serves the individual. It's not because it serves businesses. It's because it serves the individual, and it serves individual freedom. And so the top priority has to be individual liberty. And if you believe in that, then you have to say, if somebody is impinging on my individual liberty, isn't it the government's role to stop them from doing that? Let's say that I decided to, kidnap one of you and lock you up in a room. Wouldn't you expect, and I'm impinging on your individual liberty, wouldn't you expect government already has made that illegal. Mm-hmm. And so the same principle adheres here. And that's why I was a little surprised to hear that there were people in the legislature who were saying, well, you can't regulate business. You're not regulating business. What you're doing is you're telling business that it shall not impinge on the rights of its employees, impinge on the rights of its customers.
So not only is that a primary conservative position, but it is the root of our Constitution. I mean, that is everything is kind of anchored to that principle. And so to hear fellow Republicans say, this is a government intrusion, a government regulation. I'm like, no, it's the prime directive of the government to protect our constitutional rights, our inalienable rights. And yet people that are normally on our side of conservative things, they're choosing business as the God over the people that they're for and of and by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's very clear, and you're absolutely correct, 100%, having to do with our structure, our Constitution. You'll know there are other constitutions, since ours, and they grant various rights. So if you go to Germany, for example, the government grants you the right to freedom of speech. That's not what we do. That's not what our First Amendment says. Our First Amendment says government shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech, which means that before there is government, there is freedom of speech. There's an inherent right of man to freedom of speech. And therefore, we're prohibiting the government from abridging that. So that explains the proper role of government. It was explained, of course, in the Declaration of Independence. Governments are instituted among men for one purpose, and that is, men and women.
Yeah, we don't get offended by that. We just consider it part of the English language. I think that's
we used to, didn't we?
Yes,
Yeah,
we did.
we used to.
I still do.
Governments are instituted among men for one legitimate purpose, and that's to protect their freedom and protect their safety, and not to control them. We're witnessing something that is really awful right now. We're witnessing the seizure of the public square by private enterprise. And what's happened from that is you can express yourself. If you want to go out in the public square like they used to, you can go out in Temple Square and you can make a speech if you'd like to. You probably can't because Temple Square is private.
Right.
But there are other areas of Salt Lake City where you could go make a speech. So 3 or 4 people would hear you. Somebody might put $1 in your cup, but you wouldn't have any impact. Your impact comes from the breadth of something like Facebook, Google, Twitter, all the things that are electronics, and they're stifling free speech because they can. And so my feeling is the government should step in there too and say, if you purport to be the public square, if you purport to be the public forum, then you have to conform with the rules that govern those who do control a public forum, which is the government.
Okay, so
California had a case like that called the Prune Yard case, and California, strangely enough, has a much more robust protection for freedom of speech than the federal First Amendment.
Interesting.
And yeah, it is interesting. And California has a number of things that are very surprising. One of which is an actual constitutional provision establishing the freedom of the right to privacy. It's an enumerated right.
We are having that discussion with Representative Phil Lyman later. It will be in our next episode.
He and I have been talking about it for months.
I love that. Okay, yes. Go ahead.
So we just have about another minute with you. Boy, there's so much I want to ask.
But because I actually want to go down the big tech avenue now that we have him on.
We'll have to have you come back on for that and do that specifically. But so not to use the fallacy of reasoning, a slippery slope, but in the last 2 years, every last thing I think that we've kind of talked about as warning signs. And if we go here, there's a slippery slope and they just keep coming true. Yeah. But really, what is the big threat if we don't clarify this now, clarify these inalienable rights that are being intruded upon, that are being trodden upon by private? Really, what is the bigger threat? If not here, if we don't draw the line here, then what?
Then our our system is lost, and our freedom is lost. If you cannot express yourself, if people who have legitimate ideas and people who have illegitimate ideas get censored by big tech, and that's allowed by government, and there's some argument that government is actually driving that, by the way. There are certainly elements of the Democratic Party that are promoting that whole idea, and look where they're giving their big tech's giving its money.
Yeah.
Right.
If we allow them to get away with censoring voices of Americans, then we're not going to have voices left.
But even that, that First Amendment. But we're talking, mainly tonight about this tangible threat
to our health,
and that decision and that privacy and I liked your quote. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. You said, this is quoting I think the mayor, the city manager, where they said, the city simply passed a law saying that if a firefighter is not vaccinated and the firefighter has not given a religious or medical deferral from the vaccination, they cannot continue to work and be paid. We're not forcing them. We're just saying you can't work and get paid. Any firefighter may choose not to get the vaccine. They just don't get to keep working and getting paid. So that threat to freedom to earn a living, the right to earn a living is core to also the pursuit of happiness. But where do we go if we don't hold the line here?
That's an absurd argument. That's like saying, I'll tell you what, I'm going to put a gun to your head and I want you to give me all your money. Now, you don't have to give me all your money. You're not being compelled to do that.
Right.
I can just shoot you. But you can choose to do that. That's a free choice that you make.
Yeah.
I mean, are we kidding here?
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous argument, but they've been making it all along, and they've been taking people's livelihoods away. They've been putting these firefighters, these people who are putting their lives on the line for us every single day. I can't believe, I didn't really know much about firefighters before these cases, but I've come to know them. These are dedicated people. They do things I could never do. They run into burning buildings. Are you kidding? I would never do that. I mean, I first of all don't have the training, but even if I did, that takes a special kind of person.
Yeah.
And this city, the city of LA, is throwing them out without any thought at all, and not worrying about the fact that they have to put food on the table. And there's lots of tension in a lot of homes. It's putting immense pressure on these people, and it is compulsion when you tell somebody, "I'm going to take away everything you have if you don't do what I tell you to do." And that, by the way, is what it's come down to. We want to tell you what to do because we're the government. Yeah. And if you don't do it, we're taking away everything you have.
That should send chills down every American spine. And yet too many of them, I mean, we know people, even in the Republican Party, even some Republican Party leadership suggests that the military should be used against people who disagree with their political position on a vaccine. But so court did not go your way yesterday. So what's the next step? And you commented that was a more of a political decision than a legal decision. But what comes next? Are you done, or you keep moving up? Oh
no. The first thing we did, actually, I mean, what I said to the judge, look, we got what's called a tentative ruling the day before, so we knew exactly what he was going to do. And so instead of arguing, what I said was, look, this is to the court, to the judge himself. One of the things that's true of judges is two things. One is they need you to be afraid of them. And the second thing is, and the worst thing, the thing that they cannot handle is if you aren't. And the second thing is that they want to be liked. And so what I said to that judge was, look, this is a political document. It's not a legitimate ruling. It has nothing to do with the law. And it confirms everything we said in a writ petition about that judge I said this to him, everything we said in our writ petition about you, and included in that writ petition was we were saying he was not only incompetent, but he was a ideologue. Who was driven by politics rather than principle. So I said, so there's no use in arguing with you, but we are going to file a document that challenges your right to do this, challenges your right to sit on this case, which to hear this case, and we did file that. As soon as that now triggers a process to get him disqualified from hearing this case. And we'll see how that process plays out. If it's successful, which it should be, but may not be, then he'll be removed and his decision will be reversed. If that doesn't happen, then we'll take it up on appeal. His big mistake was he didn't deal with the law. He dealt with the politics. I mean, he compared my clients and my co-counsel and myself to Holocaust deniers. To people, who don't believe that man walked on the moon. Are you kidding? This is outrageous conduct.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And like you said, if he didn't even address the legal issues, but decided to go there, I think hopefully it'll be clear to anybody looking at the case that there was bias involved, right? And you, exactly as you claimed there would be.
And that was some straight talk. Right there.
Yes, that was. Yes, that was. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, John.
Thank you.
It was a privilege to have you on. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, now we have Brandon Beckham. He is a longtime Politico. I mean, I've known Brandon forever, but right now he's famous for having directed the newly released documentary called Identity Marxism, Rise of Critical Race Theory.
Yeah.
So,
the critical race theory that doesn't exist.
no,
right?
it doesn't
we've
exist.
yeah.
So basically, the documentary is there's nothing to see here. This doesn't exist.
Yeah. I think I've heard there's no
It's like
critical
5 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's like opening credits, closing credits, because there's no critical.
and then a blank screen in between. In fact, I actually saw a news story on it, and I learned in that news story that people who are critical of what they are calling critical race theory don't, because it doesn't exist, they don't know how to even define it. Like, we can't define what it is, and it's not anywhere to be found. So tell us, Brandon, well, first tell us briefly about the movie, and then I have a few questions for you, how you made an entire documentary about nothing.
Well, I really appreciate you guys having me on your show. Look, critical race theory is happening. It's real. And this documentary digs into the tenets, the history, and the roots of critical race theory, as well as what's happening on the ground right now across the country in schools, everywhere, including, and actually this film has a focus on Utah. And we interviewed people up and down the state about what is happening in schools. We interviewed parents, teachers, students, elected officials, folks on the school board. And what we're finding out is that not only is it happening, not only is it real, but it's got some serious negative impacts to public education in K through 12 that are affecting families, student relationships with students and teachers, faculty. And it really is, I think, a blueprint for national suicide. And when I say that, I mean, I'm referring to Abraham Lincoln's quote on, this country would never fall from a foreign power, but it would happen within our own country with our own doing. And I think this is that blueprint.
So now you had some significant partners on this project. I believe Heritage came in, worked with you on it.
Yeah. So back in June of last year, I approached Senator John Johnson about the idea. He asked for a proposal. John basically said he was interested in it, but he wanted me to give him a proposal. So I did a little research and brought him a proposal, and he provided, him and his wife provided the initial, some launch
seed
funding to get it going. Yeah. And then from there, I went and talked to the Heritage Foundation, and they kicked in a good chunk. Freedom Works also kicked in with the narrator. That is a C.L. Bryant, who is well known around the country, and he also is part of the organization of Freedom Works. And he does our narration, our voiceover narration. And then the rest of the money came from executive producers across the state of Utah. I mean, over 30 donors. So this has been nothing but a grassroots project from start to finish.
So tell us what led you to this initially. Where did the idea come from? What were you seeing that led you to the point where you realized this was something important for people to learn about and to understand?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm very constitutionally oriented. And I don't just say that like with, lightly. I was just born. I was raised in the family that, that was something that was important. That was sacred. That's part of our founding principles. And it was always talked about at the dinner table. And in addition, I just felt like critical race theory was an affront to our whole constitutional foundation. Teaching kids to divide. Look in the Constitution, the first thing, that order of business they put on for our preamble is to provide for a perfect or a more perfect union, right? And so critical race theory, in my mind, is an affront to all that. The idea that we're trying to be united as a country, the idea that all men are created equal in our Declaration of Independence, which is, I interpret that as, and if you look at the research, the founders looked at that principle as we're all children of God. And because of that, we must acknowledge that there is no divine right of kings, and that all of us have inalienable rights, and the government should protect those rights. In addition to that, there's a few constitutional issues with critical race theory, and it violates the Constitution itself, as well as the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And so those things made me want to make a policy statement for the Republican Party in Utah, because I serve as part of the governing body of that party. We have a leadership committee that's called the State Central Committee, and we meet every quarter and we talk about things and how the party should be run. And I presented a resolution about critical race theory, basically calling for it to be prohibited in our schools in the state of Utah, and asking for the legislature and the governor to take care of it through legislation. And that passed. But what I saw was a lot of pushback from the media, and even some elected officials that are even in my own party seemed to kind of dismiss the issue. And I didn't think that parents were getting a fair shake. They weren't getting the story out, and they weren't being listened to. I thought that a lot of the reporting in the news regarding critical race theory was just, hey, look at these parents over here. They're so crazy. They're at this board meeting. And I thought, no, that's happening all over the country. It can't just be some crazy parents. There's something going on. And with my research, initial pointed to that it's actually a really important thing that's happening right now, and that we should be paying attention to it. So the idea was, we need to get legislation done. Okay. We need to get the right policies. Okay. So how are we going to help support that effort so that people have some information on this? Mm-hmm. And that was the catalyst for doing this.
Awesome. So, go ahead.
Well, and film is often one of the best ways to really portray the stories of what's happening in the schools. So Republicans frequently, we like to throw data, and we like to engage in debates and reasoning, but that doesn't always translate. But for people to really understand, and bringing your talent to film.
Yeah, we're not so good at storytelling, right? We aren't so good. Conservatives are not as good at storytelling, and it's good to have these stories.
Yeah.
And that's what this film showed. I was able to attend the premiere on Friday night. So tell us, and enjoyed it.
Well, you tell
Thank
us.
You. You
tell us about the movie. Let's ask, director loved it. Let's ask you, audience member.
No, it was packed with.
Okay, here comes a review by Carolyn Fippen of the newly released.
Here's the thing. I will tell you, if you're asking for a review from me, that is going to the bottom of the barrel.
Well, first of all, were you awake through the whole thing?
Absolutely.
Okay,
I was awake through the entire thing. And I was surrounded by a lot of really pleasant people, right, who were excited to see this and learn more about this as well. It really was a delightful evening. And that film was packed with information, and as Brandon said, historical as well as, modern day, what's going on right now, and with testimonials from different people who've been involved in different ways, talking about their experience, what they've seen, and what they've been, a part of observing. And it was great. But
and C.L. Bryant, the Reverend C.L. Bryant, and he was known for his own documentary back in 2012, Runaway Slave, a black Southern preacher, and so I imagine he really added something to the narration of this.
Yeah, he did. He did great. I got a chance to actually develop a good relationship with CL, and talk about a guy who's just a amazing talent, and he really did. Freedom Works, when I went and approached them, I met CL, and they said, well, what do you want from us? And do you want to do an interview with CL? I'm like, no, I don't want to do an interview with CL, because I'm already doing a ton of interviews with Black Americans. But I tell you what I do want, is I want CL's voice on there. and CL was very excited to do it. And I went in the studio with him. I spent 7 hours in the studio doing the recording with him, and until we got it right. And he's a hard worker. He loves the topic, and he's a true American. And here's the thing that people need to understand is that don't be afraid to talk about critical race theory. Don't be afraid to call it what it is, and don't be afraid to be called a racist. Because if you're white, there's a lot of white folks that are out there that are scared to be called a racist or white or black or whatever because of the woke community that wants to, like, they want to lynch on them as soon as they find that they're, trying to talk about the logics with all this stuff. And, CL is like, he's, some of these African Americans, they don't even like being called African American. They just call me American, please. Okay, great, all right. And everybody you saw in that film, Carolyn and Kim, I just want to say you missed a great event. You missed a really great event.
Sorry, you did. Well, where can I see it? Tell us where we can see it now.
Well, I'll let you know in a second. But,
he's a storyteller. Let him finish.
but we had 150 seats, and we had 175 plus people there. So we didn't even have enough seats for everybody. I actually stood up the whole movie and gave up my seat. We brought in another 20 chairs. The place was packed. It was great.
Yeah. Nice.
And I just want to say, everybody that we interviewed in that film, nobody was paid. Nobody was approached and say, can you say this or that? These are people that they're like biracial families, like Al Jackson, former Senator Al Jackson. He did an interview in this movie, and he's got, biracial family. You have people like Gary Thompson. He's a clinical psychologist for the youth. And he was in there, and he has a white wife, and he has biracial kids, of course. And so it's this thing really affects people down to the family level. It's not just about teaching history. It's the critical race theory is way beyond that. And the opponents of critical race theory often are maligned and accused of like, oh, you don't want to teach history, right? Real history.
Right.
No, that's just the opposite. In fact, we want to teach history. We want to teach all of it, right? We want to make sure that people understand the amazing foundation that our founders laid for us. They knew we didn't have a perfect union when we started this experiment, but they laid the foundation to abolish slavery, to have equal rights for everyone, but not equal outcomes. And CRT attempts to attempts to rewrite history. It is very full of Marxian themes, like equity and equal outcomes and so forth. And those are things that our founders they flat out rejected because that's not part of our system. We want to give equal opportunity, and everybody is responsible for their own outcomes as much as possible. We want to do whatever we can to facilitate those. But CRT also teaches kids to not like their own classmates because why? Oh, they're white or they're black. I'm the oppressor. You're the oppressed.
Or themselves.
It's really the most
even.
Yeah.
Exactly, for themselves. I mean, think about a kid who is a boy that's a Black American boy who is like 10 years old, and he learns that he's a victim. Now, how disempowering is that to a kid? I mean, it's just unbelievable how you can do this to kids. And the thing is they don't know how to argue it. They think this is the truth because it comes from their teachers. It comes from the education system. And then the other side of that coin is then you have white kids or kids that look white, because that's part of it too. It's all about the skin color or identity. And they're labeled as, by the way, you're racist and you're fundamentally, oppressor, and your ancestors. Look, they were just born. They didn't control this stuff. And how disempowering is it for them to now think that they are a bad person because of the color of their skin? This is such an evil, as Mike Lee said, it's as if the devil wrote it itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it really does take away from the individual the ability to be an individual, right? To grow and to learn, to improve. It takes away our humanity. And I don't, everything that you've just described, Brandon, takes the individual to a place where, and you use the term, it disempowers them. And when we have that, we can't have progress in a society, right? We have the opposite of a virtuous circle. We have a circle of degradation that just grows. Yes. And I think that with this, you end up with far worse outcomes, especially for those children who've now been told that they are incapable of overcoming. Well, they all are being told they're incapable of overcoming anything about themselves. But if you are a victim and can never be anything more than a victim, how hard are you going to try? We end up with worse outcomes for non-whites. And then that makes them even greater victims, right? So it just keeps taking them further and further down a really awful negative spiral through the generations, I would think. Nothing uplifting about it.
And I think that leads to, I mean, to me, it comes down to, this is a political thing. It's a political thing. We can't win at the ballot box. We can't win at, these ideas because they're not working, right? And so there's this idea that, okay, class warfare isn't working. Mm-hmm. So what are we going to do? We're going to move on to identity politics. And let's not just include race, but let's also include other so-called oppressed, like, sexual orientation, mm-hmm. gender identity, mm-hmm. what have you. You bring it all in, and then it's this intersectionality. Everybody is oppressed. And it really, what it does is it leads to a more divided country. That's not what we want. We don't want a divided country. We want to do everything we can to unite people, and we should unite around the principles of freedom and through the lens of liberty instead of the lens of identity. And because nothing is worse than judging somebody by some type of group thing, like, oh, I'm black, so I'm a part of all the oppressed, or I'm white, I'm part of all the oppressors. I'm gay, I'm part of all the oppressed gay people. I'm transgender, I'm also oppressed, I'm part of this. So we all come together in this intersectionality, and this is what they do in schools. And if even in Utah, if you look at the state statute for what the vision and mission is for Utah's public education system, it talks about fundamental principles, constitution, loyalty and commitment to constitutional government, character development, occupational skills, and autonomy to local communities for schools. And if you look at the mission statement for the State Office of Education or the school, the USBE, and you'll see it's a woke, social justice thing, and it's in direct opposition to our own statute.
Okay, where can I watch the movie since I missed the premiere?
Yeah, we're releasing it tomorrow. In fact, you'll be able to watch it at identitymarxism.com. We will have there. You can go there now and watch a trailer. We'll have the film available to the public tomorrow, first thing in the morning. We were exploring the option of having them in theaters across the state. However, because of the timing, we think it's important that this is released right now during the session, during when all this discussion is happening, for lawmakers and parents and concerned citizens to be able to communicate that with the lawmakers and representatives up there on the Hill. So it'll be released tomorrow, free for everyone to watch. identitymarxism.com.
Awesome.
And we'll have it shared on social media. We do have a Facebook page, Identity Marxism, it just created. So, this wasn't a concept to make money. It was a concept to help an issue. And so therefore the budget is not like a Hollywood budget, and we don't have a marketing team from Hollywood to do all these different things. So it's all done in-house. It's all done by volunteers. And so we hope that, I think this will actually make a pretty good impact, I think, because of the feedback I've heard. And I think that this is going to help awaken a lot of people. For example, Kim, you weren't there, but we had some Democrats that were at the event. And these were Black Democrats that came to watch the film, and they were invited by the folks from Blexit. and their eyes were open, and they came up and gave me a hug after the film, and I was just like, wow, that is so cruel to have people that had a whole different mindset, and now they were just like, amen.
That is
nice.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Yes. As we close up, we have to absolutely hear about your Senate campaign.
Yeah. Do you want to out on that right now? It's not official, but right?
Oh yeah, I'm happy to talk about it. Yeah, I mean, I think the issue of critical race theory was the nail in the coffin for me to run. It was just basically like, hey, you know what? It's this is such a big issue, along with a lot of other issues. I was encouraged by several people, some of which you guys probably know, that encouraged me to run for the state Senate, and I am fully engaged in that. And CRT happens to be one of the biggest issues on my agenda for my campaign platform, because I feel like it's one of the top issues. I just feel like, I'm out there talking to parents, and they're so concerned about this. And I feel like that's the future. What's the future look like? There you go. It's right there. And are we going to tackle it right now, or are we going to let it creep to the point where it gets to be out of control? And those are the leaders. Those are the next generation of voters. Those are the next generation of leaders. And are we going to have that be a whole demographic of people that hate the country, hate the Constitution, hate everything that we have right now, and don't recognize the value and the blessings we have as Americans? Can't do that. Can't allow that. And so I've just noticed that in the last 2 years, especially up there on Capitol Hill, yes, we've got some great legislators that are doing some good work, but by and large, we have a deficiency in leadership, I believe, conservative leadership, and that's where I come in. I'm an action person. I see an issue. I want to go after it. I don't just wait around and talk about it, complain about it. I like to do something about it.
Well, I mean, I can definitely vouch for that. If CRT isn't your thing, or it's not your top issue, I can absolutely. I've known Brandon probably since about 2009 or so, a long time. Solid, consistent conservative Republican, and very active in the party, very active in the community, grassroots. And I think we need a lot more of that.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, absolutely. And so tell us this just briefly. What district are you running for? Are you talking about that yet?
And where can people send donations?
Yes, there we go.
And
sure. So, thank you. That's very generous of you guys. So the district is District 23. Of course, we had the census. So everybody remembers we had the census in 2020. That data finally got around, just barely last November. So the legislature redrew the districts. And so with the new districts now, it's District 23, which includes Vineyard, half of Orem, a little bit of Provo, Linden, and Pleasant Grove. And if people are interested in helping me, because it is important to have funding in a campaign. If people want good candidates to get into office, they have to support them financially, because these are the type of people. I'm not going to get a huge donation from the NEA. They're probably going to work to get me out, because
you're not going to get a $75,000 donation from the NEA like our governor.
No, I probably won't be on their list. I'll probably be on their hit list. But the point being is that an interesting thing is a lot of people that I interviewed on the film have wanted to help my campaign, because they know where my heart is on that, and other issues too that are important. But yeah, they can go to brandonbeckham.com, and I do have it set up for donations and volunteerism and contacts and all that stuff.
Awesome.
Okay, well that's coming up. I mean, we're looking at that filing is right around the corner. February 28th is the official filing date starts. So it's moved up. I think it's important for people to know that the legislature just changed the date. So don't wait till after the legislature to see who's filing. It's now. It's in a week. It's in 10 days.
Wow.
So, and then caucus is right around the corner. So, well, congratulations, Stephen.
Yes. So. Looking forward to that. So thank you for joining us tonight. Everybody go check out the film. Give us the website address where it will be released one more time.
Identity Marxism.
Okay, identitymarxism.com, right? And brandonbeckham.com with an H in Beckham. Okay, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a good night, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you too. Bye-bye. So we will finish up. This has been an interesting episode. There is so much more that we really would love to share. But
there was all kinds of bad news today. We're going to have to,
yeah, we're going to need an extra episode.
I know, I think
somewhere.
I
Because there are all kinds of things that we really need to talk about that are going on.
Yeah.
And I think the next 2 weeks will be that way.
Right.
We'll have a lot of news coming out, a lot of kind of manipulations. I don't know if you want to call them manipulations.
Oh, no,
the machinations,
yeah, the machinations
behind the scenes, and some of them publicly. Yeah. So thanks for joining us. Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn. Hope to see you next time. Please join us. Follow us on Facebook. Listen to us anywhere you get your podcasts. And you can find us also on Rumble, on YouTube. Like us, follow us, share us, and we will see you next time.
Welcome to Straight Talk with Kim and Carolyn. We've got an amazing show for. Okay,
Start over. It's all good.
Okay.